Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Versus video, where today I'm going to be using the pairings of Vaporeon and Espeon and Flareon to beat the game. Now, why these two specific pairings? Well, back when the Evolutions video was released, using all 6 of them to beat the game, one of the comments on that video from a viewer that you've probably seen in the comments before, Rika, which she has told me to refer to her as, was wondering which of the evolutions would be the best paired together. Now personally, I think it's going to be Espeon and Vaporeon, whereas she thinks it's going to be Espeon and Flareon, and I think both are very good candidates. I feel Vaporeon just does very well against the bosses in the game, and that's really its biggest selling point. However, as she points out, not having access to many stab moves does make the water type feel a little underwhelming sometimes, and I agree because water type moves in this game are very scarce, and the best one that you can get for most water types is Water Pulse, which is only 60 base power, and you have to do all of Mount Battle Area 2 to get it, so it's a bit of a time loss for a fairly weak water type move overall. Now let's move on to Flareon, who is very synergistic with Espeon. It has fire type damage to deal with the steel types, as she points out, as well as Flareon is a very strong physical attacker, so you get the best of both worlds with Espeon and Flareon. The two potential downsides I see with this is that there are a couple bosses that I suspect are going to be a bit tricky for Flareon and Espeon, and of course Flareon is a physically attacking fire type, which really doesn't work well with the type itself, but we'll just have to see how well it does. Now, first thing that I need to get out of the way right at the start is that this video is just for fun. Of course, I don't really care if my team wins or if her team wins. It really doesn't make a difference to me as long as the video is entertaining to you. Secondly, I'm not playing favorites with the viewers, I just thought that this video would be more entertaining if the stakes were a little bit higher. And I of course asked for permission to use Rika's comments in the video. And finally, I'm not going to be playing perfectly, there are going to be mistakes, however I'm not going to try to sabotage any Pokemon team, and in fact I will be using only neutral natures, that way they are on a bit more of a level playing field. That being said, however, I am not going to adjust their IVs or EVs at all, so they will have different hidden power types, which will come into play in this video. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and finally get onto the video, and the first thing we need to go over is Espeon, who has 65 HP, 65 attack, 60 defense, 130 special attack, 95 special defense, and 110 speed. So it is a very fast, very strong special attacking psychic type that of course gets one of the best moves in the game, Psychic. And on top of that, if you evolve it from the EV that XD gives you, it gets Bite right off the bat, which is going to be very helpful in the early game because neither of these Pokemon get a special attacking type until level 16. And that's basically the gist of both of our Espeons, so let's go ahead and move on to our first contender, Vaporeon, which has 130 HP, 65 attack, 60 defense, 110 special attack, 95 special defense, and 65 speed. And as with all water types, they get access to both water and ice type moves, as well as a decent amount of normal type coverage, which all 3 types complement each other very well. However, Vaporeon is mostly well known for its survivability with that 130 base HP and 95 special defense, making it very hard to take down. Its 60 defense is a bit low, but the HP offsets it, and it has a respectable 110 special attack, so it is going to be doing quite a bit of damage. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the first order of business, and that is picking up Espeon. Now unfortunately, it's a friendship evolution, so it does take a couple levels to actually evolve, but once it does, we now have an Espeon, so we can go over our Espeon in particular, which has a quirky nature, selected because it is a neutral nature, and it has the Synchronize ability that causes any status move to afflict me to also afflict the Pokemon that caused it to me. So that could come in handy, and it gets Tackle, Tail Whip, Bite, and Sand Attack. So now let's go ahead and move on to our Vaporeon in particular, which I decided to just give the quirky nature as well. And it has the Water Absorb ability, turning any water type damage it takes into a quarter of its HP. Now unfortunately, because this isn't the starter EV, I won't actually have access to Bite in the early game, and unfortunately I'll have to use the move Tackle to attack, which definitely isn't great for Vaporeon, but I'm sure it'll get by just fine. So let's move on to the battle against the old man, and the first thing to note is that honestly, Espeon kinda sweeps everything in the early game with no real issue. Bite is just that strong, however, in cases where I don't think it'll one-shot, I can just go for Helping Hand, and it gives it a 50% boost in damage, which more than likely takes down just about everything. So with that, we beat the old man, and we now move on to the Cypher base, where I decide to fight Brown, because I have super effective damage against his ball toy. Now, unfortunately, Vaporeon doesn't yet have Water Gun, so I will just have to use Helping Hand and Bite to hopefully take it down in a single hit. It's not quite a one-shot though, it does survive with just a little bit of HP, but luckily it just decides to go for Shadow Mist to lower my evasiveness. Now unfortunately that does waste a bit more time because the animation is longer, but it shouldn't really matter in the long run. Hoot Hoot's really not taking that much damage from Tackle, so I decide to go for Helping Hand and Bite again. And it actually survives on just a little bit of HP as well, so I'm forced to use one more turn where I accidentally clicked too fast and used Helping Hand when I really didn't need to, wasting a little bit of time but doesn't really matter. At level 16, Espeon gets Confusion, which I teach over Sand Attack, and Vaporeon gets Water Gun, which I teach over Sand Attack as well, and then I go into the battle where I try to catch this Carvana for the Black Glasses item, but unfortunately it breaks free, and I take it down with Bite, which is a bit unfortunate, but I don't think damage is going to be an issue because I decide to go to Mount Battle to go pick up the Water Pulse TM, and on top of just giving me a huge damage increase, it's also going to give me a couple more levels, which should hopefully allow me to get past Livrina just that much quicker. So with that, I pick up the TM, and I teach it right away over Water Gun. And then we go into the battle against Livrina. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and I go for Bite into Beautifly and Helping Hand, hoping to take it down in a single turn. And it's not quite a one-shot, unfortunately. Hits me with a Thief, not really doing that much damage. I go for Bite to finish off the Beautifly, and then I go for Water Pulse into the Roselia. But it's because I don't really have a better option, and there's always that small chance it could confuse. I go for Confusion to finish off the Roselia, which I'm not sure if that little bit of damage was necessary, but it could have helped. And then out comes the Shadow Delcatty, and it's going to take a Water Pulse, dealing nearly half of its health. I decide to go for Bite and Helping Hand just to guarantee it goes down, which a crit certainly helps. And then all that's left is Love Disc, which I go for Bite and Helping Hand. And unfortunately it does survive on just a little bit of HP, but really it's not a threat to either of us, so I finish off with one last Bite, and we move on to the Pokemon XD staple, the obligatory Mirror B. How are you doing today, Mirror B? Well, actually, hold that thought, we gotta move on to our second contender, and that is Flareon, who has 65 HP, 130 attack, 60 defense, 95 special attack, 110 special defense, and 65 speed, and it gets access to mostly normal and fire type moves. Now, the thing about Flareon is, of course, the absurdly high 130 base attack, and a surprisingly respectable 110 special defense, making it fairly good at taking water type damage as well as dealing a lot of damage on the physical side. And its 95 base special attack is nothing to scoff at either, it's actually fairly decent. Now, unlike Vaporeon, I do think that Flareon's early game is going to be a lot faster simply because it actually is able to attack rather than being a cheerleader for Espeon, which should hopefully allow it to get through battles a lot quicker. Anyway, let's go ahead and start off the run. Of course, just as before, I evolve my EV into Espeon, and I decide to go ahead and just give it the quirky nature as well, just to keep them consistent, and of course Flareon has a quirky nature as well. It gets the Flash Fire ability, raising its next fire type damaging move if it's hit by a fire type move, which might come in handy. It does make it immune to fire as well though, which is nice, and it gets Tackle, Tail Whip, Helping Hand, and Sand Attack. So with that, we move into the battle against the old man, and like I was saying in the stats area, I'm actually able to attack fairly effectively with Flareon despite it only having Tackle. Because of its huge 130 base attack, it's still going to be dealing quite a bit of damage. So Horsey gets taken down, and then all that's left is a Shroomish, which in hindsight, maybe I should have just gone for Bite and Helping Hand to guarantee it goes down, but it doesn't really matter too much. We move on to the battle against Brown, just as before. And I'd just like to take a minute to say, if you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Anyway, using the Helping Hand Bite strategy, we're still not able to take down the ball toy. However, on the following turn, I'm able to finish it off, and because Flareon is a physical attacker, I'm actually doing more damage to the Hoot Hoot than what Vaporeon could do. And I go for Helping Hand Bite, which still doesn't quite finish it off. Maybe in that case, I should have just gone for Tackle and Bite. But anyway, we get past it. At level 16, Espeon gets Confusion, and then at level 16, Flareon gets Ember. Now, one thing to note about fire types is that they get the Charcoal item very early on in this game from this Numble, so they're able to get a 10% damage increase on fire type moves, and on this run, I'm actually able to pick up the Carvana here for the Black Glasses item, raising Bite's damage by 10%. Now moving on to the battle against Livrina, she leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly. I go for Bite into Love Disc this time because I wanted to flinch it so I can use Water Gun. Unfortunately it gets through, and Beautifly actually doesn't go down to a single Ember. I go for Bite to finish it off, and then out comes Roselia, and I think it's actually better that I wasn't able to take down the Beautifly in a single hit, because now I'm able to deal damage to Roselia, guaranteeing that it'll go down on this next turn, and then she sends out her final Pokemon, the Shadow Delcatty. And I do think that Delcatty shouldn't be able to survive too many moves. I go for Ember, dealing about a quarter, and judging by the damage, I think that Bite should be strong enough to take it down, if not, maybe Flinch, but unfortunately I get Cute Charm, so I won't be attacking half the time, and unfortunately I also don't get a Flinch. So I get immobilized by Love, Flareon goes down, and while Espeon might be able to survive one Delcatty hit, it won't be able to take on the damage from Love Disc. So unfortunately, I take my first loss here. But to be honest, that was just very bad luck, so I go back into it once again, and this time I actually get the flinch on the Love Disc on the first turn, and because of the extra level, I'm able to take down the Beautifly with a single Ember. I go for Helping Hand and Confusion just to guarantee I can take down Roselia, and then she sends out the Delcatty, and I make the same mistake again. I decide to go for Bite instead of Confusion, that way I can get the flinch, but once again I get hit by Cute Charm. Now it is a 1 in 3 chance of happening, it's just very unfortunate that it happened twice. And so I unfortunately take quite a bit of damage. I go for Ember, which doesn't quite finish off the Delcatty, and I'm really hoping Espeon gets through it. It does, finishes it off, and then all that's left is the Love Disc, which can't take down both of us, so it goes down to one last bite, and now we move on to the obligatory Mirror Bee. Sorry I cut you off earlier, Mirror Bee, what were you gonna say? Well, that's good to hear. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and move on to the graph, and this isn't really what I expected. Flareon's at 1 hour 49 minutes and 20 seconds, whereas Vaporeon's at 1 hour 54 minutes and 30 seconds. So despite having to do the extra training, it's actually caught up quite a bit, and is now only 5 minutes off of Flareon. And I think that if Flareon messes up at any point, it's likely going to lose the lead to Vaporeon, because Vaporeon's biggest strength is its consistency. But as long as Flareon has a great mid-game and doesn't lose at all, I think it should be able to maintain its lead, and hopefully continue that into the late game, but we'll have to see for sure, because we're switching back over to Vaporeon, where at level 23, Espeon learns Quick Attack, which I teach over Tail Whip, and then soon after, Vaporeon also gets Quick Attack, which I teach over Tackle. And then I pick up the Ralts for the Twisted Spoon item, raising Psychic type damage by 10%. And then I go to the Railgam Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect. And I'm going to teach Hidden Power right away to Espeon, because at the moment it doesn't have a lot of type coverage, and it's Hidden Power Electric, which is certainly a good Hidden Power type, but unfortunately it's only 35 base power, which still makes it better than using Confusion against Water and Flying types, but it's not incredible. And Vaporeon also got Hidden Power Electric, interestingly. Anyway, now moving on, I pick up the Swinub for the Never Melt Ice item to raise Ice type damage by 10%, and then soon after, Vaporeon gets the move Bite, which I teach over Tail Whip, and then I teach Ice Beam over Quick Attack. And this is usually the part of the video where I say let's move on to the battle against Snattle, but unfortunately, that footage corrupted, and I didn't catch the mistake till nearly the next boss fight. So I have decided to redraw the image from memory in Paint to hopefully give you a better idea of how it went down. So Snattle leads with a Lantern and a Quagsire, and on the first turn, I'm not sure if I Helping Hand and Confusion into Lantern or if I attack with both, but it's not enough to take it down on the first turn, and unfortunately it takes both of us attacking on the second turn to finish it off, meaning that his next Pokemon, the Shadow Lunatone, is able to come in without us doing any damage to it, and unfortunately, a Bite's not able to finish it off, so it's able to set up Shadow Sky, and then I have to finish it off with Water Pulse on that same turn. But one thing I did learn from this attempt is that had I just used Helping Hand, Espeon could have taken down the Lunatone in a single hit with Bite. Anyway, now with Lunatone down, he sends out his Castform, and Castform isn't really all that much of a threat, though it does have a very strong Weather Ball now that the weather condition is set to Shadow Sky, but it really shouldn't do that much damage. I decide to go for Bite and Water Pulse into it anyway, just to guarantee it goes down, and Bite actually gets a critical hit, taking it down right away, which is very nice. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Matang, and the Water Pulse of course hits it, dealing quite a bit of damage to it. I'm not exactly sure how much, but Espeon's Bite was able to finish off on the following turn. I go for Ice Beam into the Quagsire, taking it down to red health, and then on the following turn, Espeon finishes off with Bite, and I beat Rival on the first attempt. Thank you for joining me on this story time adventure. So let's go ahead and move on to the Snag'em base, where I teach Protect to Vaporeon over Helping Hand, And then I also teach Espeon Psychic over Confusion, which is just going to be a huge upgrade. And then I go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and unfortunately I got paralyzed by a Body Slam in the previous fight. Though Vaporeon might actually not be doing all that much this fight, I go for Psychic to take down the Electrode, and then out goes Vileplume. I decide not to learn Aurora Beam, and I go for Ice Beam into the Nuzleaf, which luckily hits the Paralysis. Then out comes the Whiscash, and I go for Psychic into the Vileplume, and then Ice Beam, because if I'm able to attack with Vaporeon, I should be able to take down the Skarmory in a single hit, as long as I don't get paralyzed, which unfortunately I do. I go for Psychic into the Whiscash, which doesn't quite take it down, but is very close. Skarmory nearly takes down Vaporeon, and Whiscash nearly takes down Espeon, but I'm able to get off an Ice Beam on Skarmory, doing quite a bit of damage, and I can finish off the Whiscash with Psychic. And because it's stuck recharging, I can safely take it down. So with that, we move on to the battle against Gorgon. He leads with a Flareon and a Celio, and I go for Hidden Power and Bite into the Celio, hoping to take it down in a single turn. Though unfortunately it does survive on just a little bit of HP left, so it's able to use Earthquake, not really doing too much damage. I go for Hidden Power to finish it off, and then go for Bite into the oncoming Slowking. And luckily this should do quite a bit of damage because it's super effective. Unfortunately it's not quite half, and the Flareon actually gets a crit, dealing quite a bit of damage to Vaporeon. Go for Hidden Power, which isn't quite enough to take it down, but Bite does, and then he sends out Ursaring, which should go down to a single Psychic, and then I go for Water Pulse into the Flareon to take it down, which then sends out his two Shadow Pokemon, the first being a Shadow Primeape, and the second being a Shadow Hypno. And I know I can take down the Primeape in a single Psychic, and I go for Bite into Hypno to start dealing damage to it because it will take at least a couple turns to take down. Bite takes it nearly to half, Shadow Storm comes out, not really doing that much damage to either. Go for Bite with Espeon, taking it down to low red, and Vaporeon finishes it off with another Bite. So with that, they are now ready to get to the last area of the game, sit at Dark Isle, but before we get there, we need to first go back to our other contestants, who are going to be following a pretty similar path, picking up Quick Attack, though Flareon can actually use Quick Attack, and then I pick up the Ralts, of course, for the extra damage on Psychic-type moves. And then I go to the Real Gab Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, once again, Hidden Power and Protect, and I'm going to teach Hidden Power to both of them, with Espeon getting Hidden Power Psychic, and unfortunately it's the same base power as Confusion, so it doesn't actually give us any advantage here. However, Flareon more than makes up for this with having a 60 base power Hidden Power Rock, which is going to be very helpful against some of the fights in the game. And so we go ahead and move on to the Tutor Lady, where I'm going to pick up the move Body Slam for Flareon. And then we go into the battle against Snaddle. He leads with his Lantern and Quagsire, and I decide to take down the Lantern first, going for Bite to hopefully get a flinch in Body Slam, which unfortunately doesn't quite finish it off, though I do get the flinch. And Rock Tomb actually does a surprising amount of damage. I go for Bite to finish off the Lantern, and then out comes the Shadow Lunatone. And something I noted from the Vaporeon run is that I'm pretty sure with a Helping Hand and Bite, it should be a one-shot, so I go ahead and go for that. But unfortunately, the Lunatone does survive on just a little bit of HP left, though I do get a flinch, so it's not able to set up Shadow Sky. I go for Bite to finish it off, and then out comes Cast Form, and I go for Body Slam into it, which takes it down below half. So I should be able to take it down the next turn with Bite, and then I go for Ember to attack his final Pokemon, which is Matang. And Ember hits it, dealing quite a bit of damage, nearly taking it down in a single hit. Flareon gets hit with another Rock Tomb, taking it down to 14, go for Bite to finish off the Matang, and then all that's left is Quagsire, which luckily doesn't decide to attack Flareon, and it goes down to one last Bite. So with that, we beat Snaddle on the first attempt, and we move on to the SS Libra, where I pick up the TM for Flamethrower, and I teach that to Flareon right away. And before Gonzap, I teach Psychic to Espeon, and I go straight into the battle. He leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and of course the Nuzleaf is going to go for Fake Out on the first turn. It hits Espeon, it hits a Spark, luckily no paralysis, go for Flamethrower, not quite enough to finish it off, though a Psychic will, and then out comes Vileplume. I go for Flamethrower to take down the Nuzleaf, and then he sends out his Whiscash, and I go for Psychic and Flamethrower, which Psychic is able to take down the Vileplume, and then Flamethrower is able to take down the Skarmory, just leaving the Whiscash left, and it doesn't really stand a chance. It gets off one Rock Tomb. I go for Psychic and Body Slam, which Psychic takes it down to low red, and Body Slam finishes it off. So, moving right along to Gorgon, he leads with Flareon and the Celio, and I go for Psychic and Body Slam into the Celio, and the reason I'm going for Body Slam is I'm pretty sure it has Thick Fat, but it doesn't end up mattering because it goes down to Psychic and Body Slam takes Slowking down to half health, and I'm realizing that I probably could have done that in the Vaporeon run as well. Oh well, doesn't really matter. He sends out Ursaring, and Flareon goes down to a Flamethrower, and he sends out his Shadow Primeape. I go for Psychic to take down the Primeape, and Flamethrower to take down the Ursaring, which Primeape goes down, no problem. I decide not to learn Smog, out comes the Shadow Hypno, and I go for Flamethrower, which doesn't quite take it down, though it does get burnt, which is actually a bad thing because it has the Guts ability, so I absolutely need to get rid of it pretty quickly. Body Slam finishes it off, and all that's left is the Hypno. It hits the Shadow Storm, not really doing too much damage, and Bite finishes it off, though I do decide to go for Helping Hand just to guarantee it goes down. Anyway, with that, these two are now ready for Citydark Isle as well, so let's go ahead and go back to the board, where we see that they are still neck and neck, with Flareon holding the lead at 4 hours 58 minutes and 16 seconds, and Vaporeon very slowly inching towards it at 5 hours 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So this race is still anyone's game, and honestly, this could go either way. I think at this point, there's not going to be too many more trainers that actually threaten them, other than maybe Ardos for Vaporeon and Eldest for Flareon, but I think if they can clear that hurdle, it'll be smooth sailing from there on out. But with that, let's go ahead and get back into the run, and back over to Vaporeon, who is now going into the battle against Lavrina. She leads with a Gorbis and a Gardevoir, and I go for Psychic into the Gorbis and Ice Beam to take down the Roselia coming out, and it goes down in a single hit, bringing out her first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Farfetch'd, and because it likes to set up Shadow Panic, I do want to get rid of it immediately, so I go for Psychic, which does take it down, and then out comes her second Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Altaria, and luckily Ice Beam takes it down as well, just leaving the Gardevoir left, and with a couple of bites it should go down. So one bite takes it down to low yellow, and a second bite finishes it off. So we beat Lavrina. Now moving on to Snaddle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Metang this time. I go for Psychic into the Quagsire, which takes it down in a single hit, and then out comes Scizor. I go for Water Pulse into it, which deals quite a bit of damage, not quite enough to take it out though. I go for Psychic to finish it off, and then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Solrock, which should go down to a single Water Pulse, which it does, and then out comes Castform. Metang uses Thunder Punch. Now the only problem with Metang using Thunder Punch is the fact that it does have that 10% chance to paralyze, which could be an issue. Castform goes down to Psychic, then out comes Starmie, his second Shadow Pokemon, and unfortunately a single bite isn't enough to take it down, though a second one will do the job. And then all that's left is Metang. Water Pulse into it, takes it down to low yellow, and it's not strong enough to take down either of my Pokemon, and it goes down to a bite. So with that, we move on to Ardos, and the trainer I think might cause the most amount of difficulty for these two. So he sends out Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and right away the Swallow uses Shadow Half, halving every Pokemon's HP, and this really caught me off guard because I was almost certain that Espeon should have been able to outspeed it. So that's not great. I go for Ice Beam to start dealing damage to the Kingdra. I go for a Bite to finish off the Alakazam, and then out comes Heracross, and I go for a second Ice Beam, but Kingdra survives on just a sliver, but luckily it decides to take itself down with Double Edge, and then out comes Electabuzz, his second Shadow Pokemon, and I'm realizing that I'm in a pretty bad spot here. Electabuzz is just too strong to be left alone, and actually survives a single Psychic, and Heracross has Mega Horn, dealing super effective damage to Espeon. So I decide to train up one more level, get Morning Sun on Espeon for extra healing, and I decided to do something I almost never do, and that's teach Hydro Pump. Now it's a very strong move, but it's not 100% accurate. So I decided to go into the battle once again, hoping that that extra level is enough to outspeed, but it still isn't. And the only explanation I can think of is that somehow it has a nature, but I'm not sure if the CPUs in this game have natures. Now, not to get too far into the nitty-gritty, but before I go into this fight, usually I check the Pokemon speed stat to see if they will outspeed the Swallow. And fittingly, in the Vaporeon video, I found that it was speed tied against Vaporeon at 105 speed, way back when. Now, usually I aim a bit higher because I think that I was actually off a bit with that. Usually I look around 110 to 116, but even still, our Espeon is 118 speed. It should be outspeeding 100%, yet for some reason it just isn't. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess, but anyway, this battle basically comes down to the fact that I got a freeze on Snorlax, and I decided to divert all my attention away from the Kingdra because we both have low defense stats. It's just going to go for double edge the entire time, so I can just wait until it gets low enough for us to take it down in a single hit, and then all that's left is Snorlax, which of course being frozen can't really do much and eventually gets taken down. And so unfortunately we got our first loss on this one, but we move on to Gorgon, who leads with a Slowking and an Ursaring, and I go for Bite and Water Pulse into the Slowking, hopefully taking it down in a single turn. Though Water Pulse just isn't quite enough, it hits an Earthquake, not really doing too much damage. And because I know I can take it down the following turn with Water Pulse, I decide to go for Psychic to take down the Ursaring, which sends out his Aggron, and then Water Pulse to finish off the Slowking, which brings out Walrein. And because the Aggron is going to protect on the first turn while Walrein goes for Earthquake, I decide to double into it, and Psychic takes it down to low yellow, and the lowered special defense guarantees that Water Pulse finishes it off, so that was quite nice. Then out comes Poliwrath, his first Shadow Pokemon, and the nice thing about Poliwrath is that it's part Fighting type, so it goes down to a single Psychic, and then out comes his final Pokemon, a Shadow Mr. Mime, and I go for Water Pulse to take down the Aggron in a single hit, and then all that's left is the Mr. Mime. I go for Bite and Ice Beam to finish it off. So now with Gorgon defeated, we move on to Eldest. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I go for Psychic to take down the Manectric in a single hit, and Ice Beam to attack the next Pokemon coming out. Unfortunately, Ninjask does get an Omni boost from Silverwind, so it will be doing a bit more damage and being a bit more annoying, but I don't think it should matter too much. Go for Ice Beam to take down the Salamence, and then out comes his Flygon. And I know for a fact Flygon will go down to another Ice Beam, so Espeon may as well take down the Ninjask this turn, that way it's not getting the extra benefits of the Omni boost. And so he sends out his Shadow Marowak, and Ice Beam does in fact finish off Flygon, sending out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Lapras. And I go for Psychic into Lapras, and Ice Beam into the Marowak to take it down in a single hit, which it does, and Psychic took Lapras down to half health. But just to be safe and make sure it's not a range, I decide to double into Lapras anyway, and it goes down to one last Psychic. So with that, we now move on to the big box legendary, Shadowlugia, and it really shouldn't be too much of an issue. I go for Bite, not really doing that much damage, and unfortunately I don't get a flinch. It goes for Shadow Blast, taking Vaporeon nearly down to half health. Yeah, I hit an Ice Beam, dealing quite a bit of damage. Bite does get a flinch this time, and Ice Beam finishes it off. So with that, we now move into the final battle against Greevil. He leads with a Shadow, Rhydon, and Moltres. I go for Psychic into the Rhydon, taking it down in a single hit, and then out comes Executor. Moltres outspeeds the Vaporeon and is able to hit a Shadow Fire into Espeon, dealing quite a bit of damage. Water Pulse isn't quite enough to finish it off either. So I have Espeon outspeed and take down the Moltres with Psychic, and because I know for a fact that Vaporeon outspeeds the Executor, I can take it down this turn with Ice Beam, sending out his Tauros and his second legendary bird, Articuno. And Articuno's really the biggest threat here. I go for Psychic, which takes it down to half. Shadow Sky gets set up, and unfortunately Hydro Pump misses. Though luckily Articuno tries to set up Shadow Sky as well, so I can go for another Psychic to finish it off, and go for Ice Beam to probably take down the Zapdos in a single hit. Tauros sets up Shadow Hold, so unfortunately this is my last turn of safety. Zapdos doesn't quite go down, though I know Espeon can outspeed, so I go for Psychic and Hydro Pump, which Psychic takes down the Zapdos, and Tauros nearly KOs Espeon, but Hydro Pump finishes the job, and we beat Greevil on the very first attempt. So a very good showing, but let's go ahead and move back over to Flareon, who is now battling Lovrena. She leads with her Gardevoir and Gorbis. I go for Psychic to take down the Gorbis just as before. However, because Flareon is actually female, I do want to get rid of the Gardevoir. Unfortunately, a Body Slam just isn't quite enough. I go for Bite to finish it off, and then I go for Flamethrower because Attract will be gone once the Gardevoir leaves, and I can immediately take down the other Pokemon that could attract Flareon. So all she's left with are her two Shadow Pokemon, the Shadow Farfetch'd and Altaria. So I go for Psychic into the Farfetch'd to take it down right away, just in case it ends up outspeeding Flareon. And I go for Hidden Power Rock to take down Altaria with a crit. And now we move on to Snaddle. He leads with his Quagsire and Metang. And I go for Psychic into the Quagsire right away, taking it down. And then I go for Flamethrower to take down the Scizor, which goes down in a single hit. Then out comes the Shadow Solrock once again. And Metang goes for Psychic, not really doing that much damage. I go for Bite into Solrock, which doesn't quite finish it off, but Hidden Power cleans up, and then out comes Castform. and I decide to go ahead and take down both of them, a Psychic to take down the Cast Form, and a Flamethrower to take down Metang. But I'm interrupted in the middle of it because Espeon gets the move Morning Sun, which I decide to teach over Hidden Power, and then all that's left is the Shadow Storm me once the Metang goes down to Flamethrower, which it really shouldn't be a threat at all because I go for Bite and Body Slam. Bite takes it down to low red, and Body Slam finishes it off. So a very quick Snaddle. Now before the next fight, I decide to teach Protect over Helping Hand, and then I go into the battle against Ardos. He leads with Shadow Swallow and Alakazam. And this time, I actually outspeed the Swallow, so I'm able to take it down before it sets up any of its shenanigans. And then Alakazam uses Psychic into Flareon, not really doing too much damage, though it did get a special defense drop. Body Slam finishes it off, and then out comes Heracross. I go for Psychic into Kingdra and a Flamethrower to take down the Heracross. Kingdra survives on just a sliver, and Flamethrower finishes off Heracross. Out comes Electabuzz, and Kingdra goes for Hydro Pump. Luckily, it decides to target Espeon instead of Flareon. I go for Psychic into Electabuzz and Body Slam to finish off the Kingdra, and then all that's left is the Shadow Snorlax. But unlike the Vaporeon duo, I actually have a physical attacker to deal with it. So I go for Bite and Body Slam, hoping for a flinch, and Body Slam does quite a bit of damage to it, taking it down to half. Flareon survives on 9 HP, Snorlax halves its remaining HP, and Psychic is enough to finish it off. So with that, we move on to Gorgon. He leads with the Slowking and Nurturing, and I go for Bite and Body Slam to take down the Slowking in a single turn, and then he sends out his Aggron, and at this point I don't know if one of them is going to use Protect or not, so I decide to attack both, and Ursaring goes down to the Psychic. Out comes Walrein, and of course Aggron protected itself. I go for Psychic, nearly taking down the Walrein in a single hit, and I take down the Aggron with Flamethrower, sending out his first Shadow Pokemon, the Shadow Poliwrath. And of course it's not really a threat because it goes down to a single Psychic, and that just leaves the Walrein and the Shadow Mr. Mime, which I think I could have probably taken down Mr. Mime in a single Body Slam, but I decided to take down the Walrein instead, just leaving the Mr. Mime left. Go for Bite and Body Slam, which Bite takes it down very low, it outspeeds, is able to hit a Shadow Storm, not really doing that much damage, and Body Slam finishes it off. So with Gorgon defeated, we move on to Eldis, and probably the only real struggle that Flareon might have, and that's because he has the two Dragon types, those being Salamence and Flygon, and while Salamence does take super effective damage from the Hidden Power Rock, but because it has the Intimidate ability, it lowers my attack, so I'm not really doing as much damage as I could be. Psychic luckily does finish it off, and then out comes Flygon, and my best move for dealing with it is Body Slam, which isn't that great because of the Intimidate. However, what I failed to consider is that Espeon is here, and Psychic just takes it down in a single hit, so Flareon's biggest threat is gone. Out comes the Shadow Marowak, and I go for Body Slam, which luckily does get a paralysis, but it doesn't really do too much damage, though it really doesn't matter. I go for Psychic to finish it off, bringing out his final Pokemon, the Shadow Lapras, and I go for Hidden Power Rock to take down the Ninjask at this point. And so all that's left is that Lapras. I go for Flamethrower and Psychic, which takes it down in a single turn. So with that, we go ahead and move on to the battle against the big box legendary Shadow Lugia. And I realized that I might have made a little bit of a mistake not equipping the White Herb on Flareon, and the reason being is that Lugia does have Shadow Down, though because our defense stats are low, it's never going to go for it. But it would have been very helpful in this fight, especially when the Tauros comes out, because it would have reset the Intimidate, though I do still have leftovers, so this still could go very well. Go for Psychic to take down the Rhydon in a single hit, then out comes Exeggutor. I go for Hidden Power to take down the Moltres in a single hit, very nice. Then out comes the Tauros. I get the attack drop, and now to see if I made a critical mistake here. I go for Psychic to take down the Tauros, which leaves Articuno wide open for a Hidden Power Rock, and it doesn't take it down in a single hit. And I'm almost certain it's only because of the Intimidate, so I am able to finish off the Articuno with a Flamethrower. Then out comes its final Pokemon, the Shadow Zapdos. Exeggutor misses a Shadow End. I go for Hidden Power into Zapdos to see how much damage it would do, and it's not a lot, and Flareon goes down to a Shadow End. So going back into the battle once again, and this time I actually have equipped the White Herb, and as you might expect, the start of this battle is exactly the same. I go for Psychic to take down the Rhydon, and then I go for Hidden Power to take down the Moltres. So with that, out comes the Tauros and Exeggutor, and now to do it again, I go for Psychic to take down the Tauros, bringing out the Articuno, And now it's time to see if it actually was the Intimidate that prevented a one-shot, which it seems to have been, and then out comes Zapdos. I go for Psychic into it and Flamethrower to finish off the Executor because even though Zapdos does hit fairly hard, both of my Pokemon are very specially tanky, so it's not going to be enough to take us down. And so I can finish it off on the following turn and beat Greevil on a second attempt. Still not too bad, and honestly, if I had just equipped the White Herb right off the bat, I'm pretty sure I could have done that on the first attempt. But regardless, it's time to see just how well these two did. Starting with the Vaporeon team, they beat the game at a time of 6 hours, 43 minutes, and 22 seconds at level 55, and had one feint throughout the entire game. So how well did the Flareon team do? Well, it beat the game at a time of 6 hours, 31 minutes, and 6 seconds at level 57 with 2 feints. So it is now time to declare our victor, which is the Flareon team, who ended up beating Vaporeon by 12 minutes. Now, both of these Pokemon ended up losing a battle against one of the endgame bosses, which I think is actually where a lot of the time save was, because losing against Greevil is bad, because all of his Pokemon are Shadow Pokemon. However, getting to Greevil isn't that much of a time loss, because it's really just right around the corner. Compare that to losing to Ardos, where you have to go back to the Pokélab, then over to Gattian Port, then take the boat over, fight the guy at the bottom of the elevator, take the elevator, and then finally get up to Ardos. Though, to be fair, I did want to get the extra experience, that way I could get up to level 52 to hopefully outspeed Swellow. In hindsight, maybe I should have just used the rare candies, but I don't think it would have saved enough time for Vaporeon to catch up, even if it hadn't lost against Ardos, because Flareon still had a 4-minute lead. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to a few other things that I need to note. The first of which is obviously I did Vaporeon first, so I did have a little bit of note-taking done for Flareon, though it wouldn't have made more than maybe a minute or two of difference, and even then I ended up making mistakes throughout the run that probably got rid of that time anyway. And the other thing to note is that their hidden power types were different, and while Flareon did get the very good hidden power Rock at a very decent base power, and while I might tote it as the best attacking type in the game, it's really only because it does well against Greevil, and so it's just very nice to have. And Espeon did have hidden power Electric, which might not sound all that great. However, at the time I only had the move Confusion to deal with a lot of the water types that neither could really deal with, so hidden power Electric was actually very nice up until I got the move Psychic. So with that, we go ahead and crown our victor, the Flareon team, which is in the SS tier right behind Kyogre, and of course right behind them is Vaporeon. And of course I need to give a congratulations and a thank you to Rika for allowing me to use the comment and giving me the suggestion in the first place. So if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!